Dr. Zixnex peered through his ocular appendages at the peculiar substance swirling in the Petri dish before him. His tentacles quivered with excitement, a reaction that would have been considered unseemly among his species if anyone else had been present to witness it. But here, in the sanctuary of his private lab, aboard the galactic research vessel Curiosity, he allowed himself this small indulgence. Well, he muttered to himself, his voice a curious blend of clicks and whistles. What do we have here? You fascinating little strands of genetic material. The DNA sample in question had been obtained through means best left unmentioned in polite company, from a being known as a human. These creatures hailed from a backwater planet called Earth, classified as a death world due to its frankly ridiculous conditions, high gravity, extreme temperature variations, and an atmosphere laced with corrosive oxygen. It was a miracle anything survived there at all, let alone evolved sapience. Dr. Zixnex chuckled, a sound reminiscent of marbles rattling in a tin can. I bet you think you're so special, don't you, coming from that hellscape of a planet? Well, let's see what makes you tick, shall we? He reached for a vial of standard nutrient solution, preparing to add it to the sample. It was a routine procedure, one he'd performed countless times on specimens from across the galaxy. But as the first drop fell, something extraordinary happened. The DNA moved.
Now, it's worth noting that DNA doesn't typically move. It's not supposed to wiggle, wriggle, or do the che-che. It's meant to sit there, looking pretty and encoding genetic information like a good little molecule. But this was doing the genetic equivalent of a breakdance routine.
Dr. Zixnax's eyes, all 7 of them, widened in shock. By the great void, he exclaimed, nearly knocking over his chair as he scrambled backward. What in the name of all that's scientifically sound is happening here? The DNA strands began to coil and uncoil rapidly, almost as if they were laughing again, which was, of course, preposterous. DNA doesn't laugh. It doesn't have a sense of humor. It doesn't even have a Facebook account. But there it was, writhing in the Petri dish like it was having the time of its life at a subatomic dance party. Dr. Zixnex, his initial shock wearing off, leaned in closer. Fascinating, he whispered, his scientific curiosity overriding his common sense. Simply fassy. You. He jerked back, nursing a singed tentacle. The DNA had sparked. That couldn't be right. He must be hallucinating. Perhaps he'd inhaled too many fumes from the Arcturian mold samples earlier. But no, there it was again. A tiny arc of electricity jumped from one strand to another, like the world's tiniest, most improbable lightning storm. This is impossible, Dr. Zixnex muttered, frantically scribbling notes with 3 of his appendages while the other 5 flailed in disbelief. DNA doesn't conduct electricity. It doesn't move. And it certainly doesn't. Oh, come on now, that's just showing off. The DNA had begun to arrange itself into complex patterns, forming what looked suspiciously like a smiley face. Dr. Zixnex squinted at it. Was that a 1? He needed backup. This was too much for one alien scientist to handle. With a trembling tentacle, he reached for the ship's intercom. Attention, all scientific personnel, he announced, his voice cracking like a pubescent Florbian. This is Dr. Zixnex. I need everyone to report to Lab Fu2 immediately. And bring whatever equipment you think might be useful against sentient, possibly malevolent DNA. Oh, and maybe some snacks. I have a feeling we're going to be here a while. The alarms began to blare throughout the ship. Dr. Zixnex turned back to the Petri dish. The DNA had rearranged itself again, this time forming what appeared to be words. "Hello, world," he read aloud, his voice a mixture of awe and abject terror. Oh, this cannot possibly end well. Dr. Klurp burst into Lab 42, his gelatinous form jiggling with each bouncing step. "Zixnex," he bellowed, his voice sounding like a cow attempting to speak through a kazoo. "What's the meaning of this? I was in the middle of a delightful nap cycle."
Dr. Zixnex, still hunched over the Petri dish, didn't even bother to look up. "Klurp, my old friend," he said, his voice unnaturally calm for someone who had just witnessed the laws of biology being casually tossed out the airlock. Tell me, in all your years of studying xenobiology, have you ever seen DNA?
Klep's eye stalks swiveled towards each other in the Zygonian equivalent of raising an eyebrow. Dance? Sykes Nex. Have you been sampling the Rigelian fungus again? I told you that stuff makes you see great galactic gobia. The gelatinous scientist's exclamation came as he finally caught sight of the Petri dish. The DNA sample was now spinning rapidly, creating a miniature vortex in the nutrient solution. What is that? Clerp stammered, his usual bravado evaporating faster than water on a Mercurian beach. That, my dear Clerp, Sykes Nex replied, a hint of manic glee creeping into his voice, is human DNA. Fascinating, isn't it? It seems to have developed a mind of its own, or perhaps it always had one, and we're only now realizing it. Either way, I believe we may need to revise our definition of life after this.
Clerp inched closer, his curiosity overcoming his initial shock. But how is this possible? DNA is just a molecule. It can't
Be able to spell out, take me to your leader in nucleotide sequences. Six Nax finished for him, gesturing to the Petri dish where, indeed, the DNA had arranged itself into those very words. Yes, well, it seems our little human sample didn't get that memo. Just then, the lab doors hooshed open again, admitting a flood of scientists from various species. There was Dr. Exolophone Yays. That was her real name, much to the amusement of her human colleagues, an avian creature whose feathers were currently puffed out in agitation. Dr. Blorp, a sentient fungus who communicated through spore emissions and interpretive dance, oozed in behind her. And bringing up the rear was Dr. Crookrick, an insectoid being who was currently clicking his mandibles in what could only be described as scientific excitement. All right, Zixnax, Xylophone trilled, her voice like a flute being played by an over-enthusiastic toddler. What's so important that you had to interrupt my important research on the mating habits of Venusian slugworms? Zixnax, with a flourish that would have made a stage magician proud, gestured towards the Petri dish. Colleagues, I give you living deer. There was a moment of silence as the assembled scientists peered at the dish. Then chaos erupted. Impossible, preposterous, inconceivable. Lunchtime already. The last comment came from Dr. Blorp, who had a notoriously poor sense of timing. Crick scuttled forward, compound eyes fixed on the swirling DNA. Fascinating. It appears to be attempting communication. See how it's forming patterns. Indeed. The DNA was now spelling out a series of numbers. What do you suppose it means? Clerp asked, his gelatinous form quivering with excitement. Sykes Nex squinted at the sequence. It looks like coordinates. Yes, galactic coordinates. But where do they lead?
Dr. Xylophone, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly let out a squawk of recognition. Those are the coordinates for Earth. The human home.
A hush fell over the lab, broken only by the soft splorching sound of Dr. Blorp's stress oozing. Well, Zixnax said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, it seems our little DNA friend wants to phone home. How charmingly cliché. I don't suppose anyone here has seen that quaint human film. What was it called? Yeah. Blank stares met his attempt at humour.
Never mind, he sighed. The question is, what do we do now? We can't very well ignore this. It's the scientific discovery of the millennium. Living, conscious DNA that can communicate.
Kirkrick's antennae twitched thoughtfully. We must study it further. Perhaps we can learn to communicate with it more effectively. Communicate with it, Clerp exclaimed, his voice rising to a pitch that threatened to shatter every piece of glassware in the lab. Are you insane? This is clearly the first stage of a human invasion. They've sent their DNA as a scout. Dr. Xylophone rolled her eyes, a gesture she'd picked up from watching too many human sitcoms. Don't be ridiculous, Clerp. How could DNA invade anything? It doesn't even have legs. As if on cue, the DNA in the Petri dish began to form tiny, leg-like structures. There was a collective gasp from the assembled scientists, followed by the distinct sound of Dr. Blorp fainting. It's an oddly squishy sound, in case you were wondering. You just had to say it, didn't you? Zixnax grumbled, shooting Xylophone a glare. The DNA, seemingly encouraged by their reaction, began to move more vigorously. It started to climb the sides of the Petri dish, defying not only the laws of biology, but apparently gravity as well. "Containment!" Kirkrick shouted, his usual calm demeanor cracking like an egg on a hot sidewalk. "We need containment protocols now." The lab erupted into frenzied activity. Clerp oozed towards the ship's intercom, while Xylophone began frantically pecking at a nearby computer terminal. Kirkrick, meanwhile, had produced a tiny flamethrower from somewhere best not to ask where insectoids keep their equipment, and was eyeing the Petri dish with a mixture of scientific curiosity and primal fear. Zixnex, however, remained rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on the DNA sample. It had stopped its ascent up the Petri dish and was it looking at him? Can DNA look? These were questions he'd never thought he'd have to ask, and he'd once had to study the mating habits of pan-dimensional quantum slugs. "Remarkable," he murmured, leaning in closer. "Simply remarkable. You're not just alive, are you? You're IK. But how? What makes human DNA so special?" No, the DNA, as if in response, began to form new shapes. Zixnax watched in awe as it spelled out a message, letter by letter. "We're Legion." "Oh, come now," Zixnax chuckled nervously. "There's no need for dramatics. We're all friends here, aren't we? Just a bunch of curious scientists and one surprisingly lively DNA sample." The DNA paused for a moment, as if considering this. Then it reformed into a new message. "Just kidding. Want to hear a joke?" Zixnex blinked all 7 of his eyes in rapid succession. "Aye." By now, the other scientists had noticed the exchange and had cautiously gathered around the Petri dish again. Is it trying to tell a joke?" Xylophone asked, her feathers slowly unknotting from their stress-induced configuration.
"Apparently," Zixnax replied, still not quite believing what he was seeing. "Well, go on then." He addressed the DNA directly, feeling only slightly foolish for doing so. "Let's hear this joke."
The DNA swirled for a moment, then spelled, "Why don't scientists trust atoms?" There was a pause as the assembled xenobiologists looked at each other in confusion. Finally, Kirkrick ventured, "Because of their unpredictable quantum nature." The DNA wiggled in what could only be described as a shake of the head, then spelled out the punchline, "Because they make up everything." There was a moment of silence, followed by a collective groan that rippled through the lab. That, Clerp declared, his gelatinous form quivering with indignation, was terrible. "Agreed," Xylophone chirped. "If this is an invasion, they're trying to defeat us with bad puns." Zixnax, however, found himself chuckling. "You have to admire the spirit," he said. "Here it is, a strand of DNA that suddenly found itself sapient, and its first instinct is to tell a joke. There's something very human about that." The DNA, apparently pleased with this assessment, began to dance again, this time forming a series of simple images. A smiley face, a star, a crude representation of a DNA helix. "It's like watching a child discover finger painting," Kirkrick observed, his earlier fear replaced by fascination. "It's learning to express itself."
"But how?" Clerp demanded. "How is any of this possible? DNA doesn't just become sentient."
Zixnax stroked his chin tendril thoughtfully. "Perhaps it's a result of the unique conditions on Earth. We've always known it was a death world with environmental pressures unlike anything else we've encountered. Maybe in adapting to survive there, human DNA developed possibilities we've never considered." "Are you suggesting," Xylophone said slowly, "that all human DNA might have this potential?" The implications of that question hung in the air like a heavy fog. If all human DNA was capable of this, then every cell in every human's body was potentially a tiny, intelligent entity. The entire human race could be walking colonies of microscopic civilizations. "We need to study this further," Kirkrick declared, his scientific excitement overriding any lingering caution. "Think of the possibilities. We could revolutionize our understanding of biology of life itself, not to mention the potential medical applications," Clerp added, warming to the idea. "Imagine being able to communicate with cells, to direct them to heal injuries or fight diseases." As the scientists excitedly discussed the ramifications of their discovery, the DNA in the Petri dish continued its dance, spelling out fragments of human knowledge. Mathematical equations, snippets of poetry, even what appeared to be a recipe for something called chocolate chip cookies. Zixnex watched it all with a mixture of awe and amusement. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "I have a feeling our little discovery here is going to turn the galactic scientific community upside down." The DNA, as if in agreement, formed a simple thumbs-up symbol. "Well then," Zixnex continued, addressing the DNA directly, "I suppose we should make introductions proper. I am Dr. Zixnex, and on behalf of the galactic scientific community, I'd like to formally welcome you to Sapiens. Do you have DNA?" swirled for a moment, considering, then spelled out, "Call me Helix." "Helix?" Zixnex repeated, nodding approvingly. "A pleasure to meet you, Helix. I have a feeling this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and a very, very long series of ethics committee meetings." As if to punctuate this statement, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. This is Captain Zarzak. We've just received a transmission from Galactic Central. Apparently, they've detected some sort of anomalous life readings from our ship. Would anyone care to explain why I'm getting calls from panicked bureaucrats about a potential human bioweapon on board? Anyone? Bueller?" The scientists exchanged glances that ranged from guilty to excited to mildly nauseous in Dr. Blob's case, though that might have just been his natural state. Zixnex cleared his throat, or at least the Zargonian equivalent of a throat. "Well, colleagues, it seems the proverbial cat is out of the equally proverbial bag. Shall we go explain to our dear captain why we have a sentient DNA sample named Helix doing the Macarena in a Petri dish?" "Oh yes," Xylophone trilled sarcastically. "I'm sure that will go over splendidly. Sorry, Captain. We were just casually redefining the nature of life itself. No big deal. Would you like to hear a bad joke about atoms?" Kukrike's mandibles clicked in what might have been a chuckle. "Well, when you put it that way, it does sound rather absurd."
Absurd, Clerp exclaimed, his gelatinous form rippling with indignation. "This goes beyond absurd. This is
"Revolutionary," Zixnex finished for him, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is the kind of discovery that changes everything, and we, my friends, are right at the center of it." As if to emphasize his point, Helix chose that moment to spell out another message.
"So, when do I get my Nobel Prize?"
The lab erupted in a mixture of laughter, groans, and in Dr. Blob's case, confused spore emissions. "I think," Zixnex said, trying and failing to suppress a grin, "that we might be getting a bit ahead of ourselves. First, we need to convince the captain and Galactic Central that we haven't accidentally created a doomsday weapon." "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" Xylophone asked, her feathers ruffling skeptically.
Zixnex pondered for a moment, his tentacles writhing in thought. Then, slowly, a mischievous grin spread across his face. "Well, my dear colleagues, I believe it's time we introduced the galaxy to the concept of show and tell."
Captain Zarzak was not having a good day. It had started normally enough. He'd enjoyed his morning cup of hypercaffeinated Javian Java, checked the ship's systems, and even managed to beat his personal best in the virtual reality Zerblatt tournament. But then the call had come in from Galactic Central, and everything had gone, as the humans so colourfully put it, to shit. Now he found himself standing in Lab 42, surrounded by his top scientists, all of whom were wearing expressions that ranged from excited to guilty to. Was Dr. Blob melting? No, wait, that was normal for him. "All right," Zarzak growled, his voice reminiscent of gravel in a blender. "Would someone please explain to me why I've got the Galactic Council breathing down my tentacles about some sort of human bioweapon?"
Dr. Zixnex stepped forward, clearing his throat analogue. "Well, Captain, it's a rather fascinating story, really. You see, we were conducting routine analysis on a human DNA sample when we made a rather unexpected
Zarzak's eyes narrowed. "Define unexpected, Doctor." "Because in my experience, unexpected on this ship usually means a catastrophic, reality-bending, or tentacle-growing."
Ah, well, Zixnex hedged. It's more in the realm of paradigm shiftings and scientifically revolutionary. Really?
Out with it, Zexnex. Zarzak bellowed, his patience wearing thinner than a Venusian silk neckline. DNA came alive. Dr. Klupp blurted out, his gelatinous form quivering with a mixture of excitement and terror. Zarzak blinked slowly, his expression unchanging. I'm sorry, I must have something in my auditory reception organs. For a moment there, I thought you said the DNA came alive. That is, in fact, what he said, Captain. Dr. Eisliro chimed in, her feathers ruffling nervously. And it's not just alive, it's sentient. And it has a rather unfortunate penchant for bad jokes.
The captain's eye stalk swiveled, taking in each of his scientists in turn. Is this some sort of elaborate prank? Because if it is, I must say, your timing is atrocious.
I assure you, Captain, this is no joke, Zixnax said solemnly. Then, with a flourish that would have made a stage magician proud, he gestured to the Petri dish on the nearby lab bench. Allow me to introduce you to Helix. Zarzak leaned in, his multiple eyes focusing on the dish. At first, he saw nothing but a swirling mass of what looked like ordinary DNA. But then, before his disbelieving eyes, the strands began to move with purpose, arranging them. Hello, Captain. Nice tentacles.
Zarzak jerked back so quickly he nearly toppled over. By the great galactic void, he exclaimed, his professional demeanor cracking like an egg on a hot sidewalk. It really is alive.
Not just alive, Captain, Crick chittered excitedly. Sentient, self-aware, and apparently quite the comedian. As if to prove the point, the DNA rearranged itself again. Why don't scientists trust atoms? They make up everything. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the sound of Dr. Blorp's suppressed giggles. It should be noted, sound disturbingly like a slowly deflating balloon. Well, Zarzak said finally, his voice a mixture of awe and resignation. I can see why Galactic Central is in a tizzy. This is... Precisely, Captain, Zixnex agreed eagerly. We're on the cusp of a breakthrough that could revolutionize our understanding of life itself. Think of the implications. If human DNA can achieve sentience under the right conditions, what else might be possible?
Zarzak held up a tentacle, stemming the tide of the scientist's enthusiasm. That's all well and good, Doctor, but it doesn't change the fact that right now, the Galactic Council thinks we're harboring some sort of human bioweapon. How do you propose we explain? This? He gestured vaguely at the Petri dish, where Helix was now attempting to recreate the Mona Lisa nucleotides.
Zixnex's eyes gleamed with a manic light that Zarzak had learned to be wary of. Well, Captain, I have an idea about that. But I must warn you it's a bit more unconventional than sentient DNA with a bad sense of humor, Zarzak asked dryly. Well, Zixnax hedged possibly. You see, I propose we introduce Helix to the Galactic Council directly. Let them see for themselves that we're dealing with a new form of life, not a weapon. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the soft sound of Dr. Blorp's dress oozing onto the lab floor. Are you out of your mind? Cellophane squawked, her feathers puffing out in alarm. We can't just waltz into the Galactic Council chambers with a Petri dish full of chatty DNA. Why not? Crick chittered, his compound eyes gleaming with excitement. It would certainly make for a memorable presentation. Zarzak pinched the bridge of his nose what passed for it on his species and sighed deeply. I can't believe I'm even considering this, but Zixnax, you may be onto something. If we can demonstrate that this Helix is a sentient being and not a weapon, it might just get us out of this mess.
Excellent. Zixnax exclaimed, his tentacles wriggling with excitement. I'll begin preparing a presentation immediately. Klupp, start working on a portable containment unit for Helix. Xylophone, I'll need you to compile all our research data. See if you can come up with some visual aids that won't give the council members nightmares. And someone please moop up Dr. Blorp. He's starting to stain the floor.
As the scientists scurried off to their tasks, Zarzak turned back to the Petri dish. Helix had spelled out a new message. Do you think the council will like my knock-knock jokes? Zarzak felt a headache coming on. Zixnax, he called out. Make sure the containment unit has a mute button, will you? The Galactic Council chamber was a sight to behold. Soaring ceilings stretched up into darkness, while holographic displays flickered and danced in the air, showing everything from real-time galactic news to the latest stock prices for dilithium crystals. Representatives from 1,000 worlds milled about, their forms ranging from the mundane to the mind-bendingly bizarre. And into this august assembly strode Captain Zarzak, followed by his team of scientists, each wearing an expression that could best be described as barely contained panic mixed with manic glee. Zix-Nax brought up the rear, carefully carrying a small glowing containment unit. As they approached the central podium, a hush fell over the chamber. Councillor Zygrate, a being that looked like what might happen if an octopus mated with a disco ball, leaned forward, its crystalline eyes glinting. "Captain Zarzak," it intoned, its voice resonating through the chamber like a gong underwater. "You stand accused of harboring a potential bioweapon of human origin. How do you plead?" Zarzak cleared his throat, silently cursing the day he'd ever agreed to captain a research vessel. "Councillors, esteemed representatives, I assure you that the entity aboard our ship is no weapon. In fact, it represents a scientific breakthrough of galactic proportions." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Councillor Bleep Bloop, a sentient eye housed in what looked suspiciously like a souped-up toaster, spoke up. "Explain yourself, Captain. Our sensors detected an anomalous life form originating from human DNA. Given humanity's status as a Death World species, you can understand our concern." "Of course, Councillor," Zarzak nodded. "And that's why we've brought the individual in question here today. Dr. Zix-Nax, if you would." Zix-Nax stepped forward, placing the containment unit on the podium. With a flourish, he activated it, projecting a holographic image of the petri dish above the assembly. "Esteemed councillors," Zix-Nax began, his voice quivering with barely contained excitement, "allow me to introduce you to Helix, the galaxy's first known example of sentient DNA." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of shocked exclamations, disbelieving snorts, and in the case of the Gloopian representative, startled ink squirting. "Preposterous! Impossible! Is this some kind of joke? Speaking of jokes, have you heard the one about the photon that walked into a bar?" The last comment came from the holographic display, where Helix had spelled out the words for all to see. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by a poorly suppressed giggle from Dr. Blorp. Councillor Zygrate's crystalline eyes narrowed. "Are you telling us, Dr. Zix-Nax, that this DNA is not only alive but capable of communication?" "Indeed, Councillor," Zix-Nax replied, practically bouncing with excitement. "Helix here has demonstrated not only sentience but a rather unique personality." Observing his prompting, Helix began to move, spelling out a series of messages.
"Greetings, Galactic Council. I come in peace, mostly because I don't have any arms."
"I may be just DNA, but I've got a great sense of humor. It's in my genes. Why don't scientists trust atoms? They make up everything." The chamber was silent for a long moment, then erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted questions, demands for explanations, and in the case of the Zorblaxian delegate, a marriage proposal their species had always been oddly attracted to spiral shape. Councillor Bleep Bloop's circuits practically sparked with curiosity. Fascinating. But how is this possible? DNA is simply a molecule, a carrier of genetic information. It shouldn't be capable of independent thought or action. Dr. Xylophone stepped forward, her feathers ruffling importantly. "That's what we thought too, Councillor. But it seems that human DNA, when exposed to certain conditions, can exhibit properties we never imagined possible. We believe it's a result of the extreme environmental pressures on Earth, the human homeworld." "Are you suggesting," Councillor Zygrate asked, its crystalline form shimmering with alarm, "that all human DNA has this potential?" "We're not sure," Zix-Nax admitted. "Helix here seems to be a unique case, possibly triggered by our examination methods, but the implications are staggering. This could revolutionize our understanding of life itself." As the council members debated amongst themselves, Helix continued its display, spelling out increasingly elaborate jokes, and even attempting to recreate famous works of art through careful arrangement of its strands. Finally, Councillor Zigrot raised a tentacle for silence. "This is indeed a momentous discovery," it declared, "but it also raises serious questions. If human DNA is capable of this, what other surprises might the species hold? Are they even aware of this potential themselves?" Captain Zarzak stepped forward. "Councillors, I propose that we establish a joint research initiative. We'll work with human scientists to study this phenomenon under the supervision of the Galactic Council. This way, we can ensure that any potential issues are addressed safely and ethically." The council chamber buzzed with discussion. Finally, Councillor Bleatbloop spoke up. "A reasonable proposal, Captain. All in favour?" A chorus of agreements rang out, punctuated by the Zorblaxian delegate's disappointed sigh. They had really hoped that marriage proposal would pan out. "Very well," Councillor Zygrot declared. "Let it be recorded that the Galactic Council hereby establishes the Human DNA Research Initiative. Captain Zarzak, your team will lead this project." And as for Helix, all eyes turned to the holographic display, where Helix had spelled out,
"Do I get galactic citizenship now? I've always wanted to visit the rings of Saturn." Zigrot's crystalline form shimmered in what might have been amusement. "We'll take that under advisement. This council is adjourned."
As the chamber began to clear, the science team gathered around the containment unit, their faces a mixture of relief and excitement. "Well," Zixnax said, his tentacles wriggling with barely contained glee, "I'd say that went rather well, wouldn't you?" Xylophone ruffled her feathers indignantly. "Well, we nearly caused a galactic incident, redefined the nature of life itself, and our DNA sample tried to flirt with a crystalline being. I'd say this goes a bit beyond, well." "Oh, lighten up, XE," Club burbled, his gelatinous form jiggling with mirth. "Think of the research opportunities. The papers will write. The headaches?" Captain Zarzak interjected dryly. "Don't forget the enormous throbbing headaches this is going to cause."
Kirkrik's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "You know, there's one thing we haven't considered yet."
"What's that?" Zixnax asked. "How are we going to explain this to the humans?" There was a moment of silence as the implications of that question sank in. Then, slowly, all eyes turned to the containment unit, where Helix had spelled out one last message. "I've got a bad feeling about this." Dr. Ellery Shen was having a typical day at the International Space Station's research lab when the call came in. She'd just finished her third cup of space coffee now with 20 more cosmic radiation, and was about to start another thrilling round of let's see what happens to this protein in microgravity, when her comm unit lit up like a Christmas tree on steroids. Dr. Chen, the voice of mission control, crackled through the speaker, sounding unusually tense. "We've just received a unique transmission. It's from the Galactic Council." Ilera nearly choked on her coffee. The Galactic Council. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for a few years, and interactions were still limited to occasional trade agreements and cultural exchanges. A direct transmission from the Council was about as common as a politician telling the whole truth. "Patch it through," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling up inside her like a shaken soda can. The screen flickered to life, revealing a being that looked like the love child of a disco ball and an octopus. Ilara recognized it as Councillor Zygrot, one of the senior members of the Galactic Council. "Greetings, Dr. Chen." Zygrot's voice resonated, sounding like a whale gargling marbles. "We have a matter of utmost importance to discuss with you. It concerns human DNA." Ilara blinked. Of all the things she'd expected the Galactic Council to want to discuss, human DNA was pretty low on the list. Somewhere between Earth's best recipe for chocolate chip cookies and the cultural significance of the Macarena. "Our DNA?" she asked, curiosity piqued. "Has there been some sort of breakthrough?" Zigrot's crystalline form shimmered in what might have been the alien equivalent of nervous fidgeting. "You could say that. We've discovered some rather unique properties in a sample of human DNA, properties that have raised some concerns among the council members." Ilara's scientist brain kicked into high gear. Unique properties. Concerns. This was starting to sound less like a casual chat and more like the opening of a sci-fi horror movie. "What kind of properties are we talking about here, Councillor?" she asked, trying to keep her tone professional despite the growing urge to shout. "What did you do to our DNA?" Zygrot seemed to hesitate for a moment, its crystalline facets reflecting the starlight in a dazzling display. Then, with a sound that could only be described as a resigned sigh, if sighs sounded like a jazz band falling down a flight of stairs, it spoke. "Dr. Chen, how familiar are you with the concept of sentient DNA?" Ilara stared at the screen, her mind racing faster than a cheetah on espresso. Sentient DNA? That was impossible, wasn't it? Then again, a few years ago, she would have said the same thing about disco ball octopus aliens. "I can't say I've ever encountered that concept outside of some very speculative science fiction," she said carefully. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Dr. Chen," Zygrot interrupted. "I'm telling you. We have a sample of human DNA that achieved sentience. It communicates. It has opinions. It tells jokes. Bad ones, I might add." Ilara felt her jaw drop. She tried to close it, but her muscles seemed to have forgotten how to work. Sentient DNA, that told jokes. Part of her wanted to laugh, thinking this must be some elaborate prank. But the serious, well, as serious as a crystalline cephalopod can look expression on Zygrot's face, told her this was no joke. How is this possible?" she finally managed to stammer out. "We were rather hoping you could help us figure that out," Zygrot replied. "We're establishing a joint research initiative to study this phenomenon, and we'd like you to lead the human side of the team." Ilara's mind was reeling. Sentient DNA, a joint research initiative with the Galactic Council, leading an interspecies team to study a phenomenon that shouldn't be possible. It was like all her wildest scientific dreams and weirdest nightmares had decided to have a party in her brain. I'd be honored," she heard herself say, even as a part of her brain screamed, "What are you doing?" "Excellent." Zygrot's crystalline form seemed to relax slightly. "We'll send a ship to retrieve you." "Oh, and Dr. Chen?" "Yes, Counselor? You might want to brush up on your knock-knock jokes. Trust me on this one." As the transmission ended, Ilara sat back in her chair, her mind spinning faster than the space station's centrifuge. Sentient DNA. Joint research initiatives. Knock-knock jokes. What had she just gotten herself into? Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, the universe, and the comedic potential of nucleotides.
The galactic research vessel Curiosity hung in space like a giant metal jellyfish, its numerous research pods extending from the central hull like tentacles reaching into the void. As the shuttle carrying Dr. Ilara Chen approached, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and trepidation.
Approaching docking bay. The shuttle's AI announced in a voice that sounded suspiciously like a bored DMV employee. "Please ensure all limbs are inside the vehicle, and all existential crises are put on hold until after disembarkation." As the shuttle smoothly glided into the docking bay, Ilara took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She was about to meet not only a team of alien scientists, but also, apparently, a strand of sentient DNA. Her life had officially become weirder than a Salvador Dali painting at a rave. The airlock hissed open, revealing a welcoming committee that looked like the setup to a bizarre joke. There was a being with more tentacles than a calamari platter, another that seemed to be made entirely of shimmering gel, a feathered creature that looked like a peacock had a baby with a synthesizer, and was that a sentient fungus? Dr. Chen? The tentacle being exclaimed, waving several appendages in what she hoped was a friendly manner. "Welcome aboard the Curiosity. I'm Dr. Snacks, lead researcher on the Helix Project."
"Helix Project?" Ilara asked, shaking a tentacle and trying not to think too hard about the squishy sensation.
"Oh yes," Snacks replied, his eyes, all 7 of them, gleaming with excitement. "That's what we've named our little DNA friend. Seemed appropriate, given its structure, and it liked the name, as a bit of a penchant for wordplay. Our Helix." Ilara nodded, feeling like she'd stepped into a particularly vivid fever dream. Right, of course. The sentient DNA likes wordplay. Why wouldn't it? "Oh, you have no idea," the gelatinous being burbled, its form jiggling with what might have been laughter. "I'm Dr. Klur, by the way, xenobiologist." And let me tell you, Helix has a better grasp of puns than most sentient species I've encountered. Fascinating, Ilara murmured, wondering if it was too late to turn around and head back to Earth. Maybe she could take up a nice, normal career, like professional lava surfing or extreme ironing.
Come, Sixnax said, guiding her with a gentle tentacle. Let's introduce you to the rest of the team and then… Well, I think it's time you met Helix.
As they walked through the corridors of the Curiositer, Ilara was introduced to the rest of the team. There was Dr. Xylophone, the avian scientist who specialized in comparative genetics. Dr. Krakracrick, an insectoid being who was an expert in molecular biology, and Dr. Blorp, the sentient fungus who, well, Ilara wasn't entirely sure what Dr. Blorp's specialty was, but he seemed enthusiastic. Finally, they arrived at a lab that looked like it had been designed by a mad scientist with a penchant for neon lighting and lava lamps. In the center of the room, on a pedestal that would have looked more at home in an art gallery, sat a glowing containment unit. Dr. Chen, Zeexnax said, his voice hushed with reverence. Meet Helix. Ilara approached the containment unit, her heart pounding. As she peered inside, she saw what appeared to be an ordinary sample of DNA suspended in a nutrient solution. But then, before her eyes, the strands began to move, coiling and uncoiling with purpose. Words formed in the solution. "Hello, Dr. Chen. Nice to meet you. I'd shake hands, but I'm a bit stranded at the moment." Ilara blinked, then blinked again. She pinched herself just to make sure she wasn't dreaming. It's really sentient," she breathed.
Oh yes, Clerp burbled. And it has opinions, so many opinions. Did you know it has strong feelings about the Oxford comma?
As if on cue, Helix rearranged itself. Oxford commas are essential, logical, and aesthetically pleasing. Despite herself, Ilara felt a laugh bubble up. "Well," she said, a grin spreading across her face, "I can't argue with that logic." "So, Dr. Chen," Zixnax said, his tentacles wriggling with excitement, ready to dive into the biggest scientific mystery of our time. Ilara looked around the lab, at the team of alien scientists watching her expectantly, and at the containment unit, where a strand of DNA was currently spelling out, "I'm not just another rungs-of-the-mill molecule, you know." She took a deep breath, feeling a surge of excitement that outweighed her lingering disbelief. This was why she'd become a scientist, to explore the unknown, to push the boundaries of what was thought possible. "All right," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "Let's do this. But first I have to know, what's Helix's stance on the great geef pronunciation debate?" As the lab erupted in laughter, and in Dr. Blorp's case, spores. Ilara knew that her life would never be the same. But then again, when you're working with sentient DNA that has strong opinions about grammar, normality is overrated anyway. And so began the strangest, most exciting chapter in Dr. Ilara Shen's scientific career, a journey that would challenge her understanding of life itself, test the limits of interspecies cooperation, and involve more DNA-based puns than she ever thought possible. Little did she know, this was just the beginning. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all, and it was about to tell the biggest joke of all, one that would shake the foundations of galactic society and redefine what it means to be alive. But that, dear readers, is a story for another day. For now, let's leave our intrepid team of scientists as they embark on their grand adventure, with Helix spelling out one last message. "Hey, Dr. Chen, want to hear a joke about sodium?" Nah, you probably wouldn't get it. The future of science, it seemed, was going to be anything but boring.